No e Māori, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susanna Swiswitki. Coming up.
The ruling party are probably not in a position to see him to stand in the election.
Fiji's former Prime Minister's ambitions are unlikely. Also, Fiji garment makers reject union claims and...
This organisation is not founded on money. It is founded on the Solomon Islands' Pacifica strength.
Pacific NGO leaders share impacts of Trump's aid cuts. A Fijian political commentator believes the Prime Minister will make sure Frank Bainimarama cannot contest in next year's general election. Mr. Bainimarama, who originally seized power in a military coup in 2006, is appealing his corruption conviction in the Court of Appeal in July. However, Canterbury University's Professor Stephen Ratuva says it's unlikely it'll be quashed under the current administration. Not only that, but the 2013 Constitution disqualifies him from contesting an election within 8 years of a conviction. The former military leader also faces 2 more criminal charges this week. Margot Staunton reports.
It's going to be a challenge for him, although the political ambition is there for him to do that, but the legal limitations are there as well. His political adversaries, Ramuka in particular, and the ruling party are probably not in a position to see him to stand in the election.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, they probably don't want him.
Do you think that he would pose a real threat?
Well, he might, but the question is, does he have enough political clout and support to be able to pose a threat? Again, that's a question which has to be tested in the election itself, if he's able to stand for the election. But the Fiji First Party, after he was disbanded, the voters they went all over the place, including the politicians who were members of the Fiji First Party. And whether that cohesion is still there is to be seen. Very, very significant amount of energy to bring the party together again. Perhaps under different guise, under a different name, and to reinvent itself. But I think it's going to be a struggle on Bainimarama's part, if ever he's going to stand for the election. But of course, the legal barriers are there. Right now, constitutionally, there's no way that he's able to stand.
So the fact that his arch rival is in power, it depends on how independent the appeal court is, but that would be the last thing that Rambuka would want, isn't it, for his conviction to be appealed and then for him to get off the other 2 charges?
Yes, certainly. I think he'll try his best to make sure that that doesn't happen. It's a kind of tit-for-tat situation where Bainimarama himself was trying his best to get Ramuka out of the race through the court process. That didn't work, and Ramuka came back and won. So there's a replay of history here.
So you're talking about the last election, which was very close?
Yes, the last election. Previous election as well.
Do you believe there is much support out there for him?
Well, people will claim that there's a lot of support for him. There still has to be tested, but certainly there has been a lot of criticism of the current government, the way they have been operating, and that would have diverted people's preferences away from them in the next election. So it's going to be an interesting election in terms of the way in which the votes will go with the new political parties, which will be contesting the election, that will fragment the votes even more to the extent that whoever comes into power will have to be, I suppose, fragments of a coalition of some kind. It may not be 3, could be more than 3. You might have smaller parties being able to come into power. But then it depends very much on the circumstances.
So I understand there's only 7 parties that have actually registered. There's another 15 that are yet to get enough support to be able to register. But that would suggest a lot of interest around the election, wouldn't it?
There's a lot of interest. And usually when there's controversy in relation to the way a government is being run, you're bound to see a lot of political parties trying to come in to fill in the void. And hopefully they can take advantage of the situation. But a lot of the small political parties are not viable enough in terms of being able to generate enough votes to get into parliament. The 5% threshold of votes hasn't been friendly to them. So a lot of those parties may not win any seats at all. Only a few, particularly the main one, might get through.
What difference would that make if Bainimarama endorsed a party?
Well, if he endorses a party, he may be able to mobilize some of his former supporters. But then it depends very much what kind of imagery he's been able to generate. Is it a new image of himself? Is it the old image? Is he going to offer something new, or is he going to go back to the old system of rule that he had? Those are some of the questions, and it still has to be tested.
Well, you're probably aware that one of the Deputy Prime Ministers, Manoa Kamikamica, said that Fiji was struggling to recover from 16 years of dictatorship, which isn't quite true, given that they had an election halfway through, but that style of rule pretty much permeated the 16-year reign anyway.
Well, in some ways, the 16 years under Bainimarama has transformed a lot of things in Fiji in terms of the power dynamics and in terms of the nature of the politics in the country. And of course, the current government have a chance to change some of it. Often political culture changes all the time. So some things have changed, some things are probably still there, and it's a process of perpetual transformation.
Fiji's union movement wants garment workers in Fiji to earn more and has accused the country's factory owners of dragging the chain. Last week, RNZ Pacific ran an interview with Jyotika Gaundasharma talking about the work they're doing with Union ID to bring the living wage to the garment workers. But Mike Taula, a former president of the Textile Clothing and Footwear Council of Fiji, has taken issue with much of what Ms. Sharma said. Don Wiseman spoke with Mr. Taula and began by asking about the state of the garment sector in Fiji.
It's quite dire. One of the main reasons before I talk about wage rates, the issue that straight after COVID in 2022 and 2023, Fiji lost around 20 to 25% of its skilled workforce to both Australia and New Zealand. So our industry, like everybody else, lost a lot of its skilled workers. And those skilled workers were being attracted to Australia through all sorts of means, particularly the PALM scheme here in Fiji that supplies workers to industries in Australia and New Zealand. But also we lost skilled workers working in industries like the meat industry in Australia, where a senior machinist in a garment factory, next thing you know, they're a boner in a Perth factory. How that happened, I've got no idea, but the Fijian government should be held to account for that. But also, we lost a lot of skilled workers who used a scam backdoor visa to get into Australia. It's a student visa. So it got people who were 30, 40, 50 years of age, working as a skilled worker in Fiji, was able to go to Australia on a student visa and work as a barista in a cafe or whatever. So this all sort of drained Fiji of its skilled workforce. So we ended up with a lot of people working in our industry who weren't skilled. So our productivity just went through the floor at the same time that wage rates were going through the roof. A no-win situation, but a lot of the information that's contained in that article that was written is just simply wrong.
Let's look at that. What was wrong?
Well, first of all, the first thing is that the garment industry had always paid the national minimum wage. So that unionist, Jyotika, is saying that, when it was $2.32 an hour and when it increased to $2.60 an hour, still the garment industry remained below $2.68 an hour. That's just totally incorrect. We were compelled by law, and we did pay all of our staff either the national minimum wage at the time, which is now $5 an hour, or they were paid above it. So that information is totally incorrect.
All right, well, let's look at what they're talking about. They want a living wage for these workers, $8 Fiji an hour. Would the industry be able to support that?
The industry is not going to be able to even pay $6 an hour, which is the government's policy to move from $5 to $6 an hour before the end of this current term. So $8 an hour, they call that a living wage. But look, a majority of women that work in our industry are the second income earner of a household. Now, yes, there are instances where they are the primary income earner of a household, but an industry can only afford to pay wage rates that are commensurate with what is the productivity. Of course we could pay $8 an hour if our workforce was more skilled and was more productive, but it just simply isn't. I've been in business in Fiji here for 33 years, and I've just closed my business totally because I was unable to sustain the overheads, not only wages, but productivity and costs associated with getting my raw material into Fiji and my finished product out of Fiji. So I had no choice in the end. I had to close my business before I went broke.
You lost a lot of workers overseas going to Australia, as you say, under this PALM scheme. And they left.
And to New Zealand.
Yes. But they've left because they could earn more money. That's the simple thing, isn't it?
That's a given. But, you earn more money in places like Australia and New Zealand, but the living costs are also quite high. So the wage rates in Fiji are commensurate with the living costs for the local population.
Do you think people can survive on $5 an hour?
Yes, people can survive on $5 an hour here in Fiji, but also $5 an hour is a base rate. Like, for instance, if you've got a machinist in your factory who has been there for 3 to 5 years and she's become quite skilled in a number of operations, you can't pay that machinist $5 an hour because she'll just simply go somewhere else that'll pay her $6 and $7 an hour. Now, most of my skilled machinists, before I had to close my business, were earning in the $6 to $7 an hour for a skilled machinist because that was the rate I had to pay to maintain their employment.
The garment industry in Fiji used to employ 20,000 odd people.
Correct.
And it's gone right back over the last 15 years or so, hasn't it?
That's totally correct.
So 5,000 workers there now, not the same number of companies, obviously.
That figure's well under 4,000 now.
Okay. Can the remaining operators survive?
Well, we've become a bit of a rump of what we used to be. Yes, there were 22,000 workers in the garment industry in Fiji at the turn of the century, but, all sorts of reasons for why that has reduced over the years. But uncompetitive pricing is the major reason. And what's left now is industries that are boutique, niche, or they've got a vertical business where they manufacture and retail. So the largest garment manufacturer in Fiji is a company called Lyndhurst, who make the Cookeye brand of clothing, and they retail the product in their own stores in Australia and New Zealand. So they're able to manufacture in Fiji and retail in Australia, so there's no middleman there. But a majority of the factories that are left here aren't vertical like that. They are factories that manufacture for a wholesaler in one of the Australia and New Zealand, and then those wholesalers then sell to the retail trade. So there's a profit margin between. And quite frankly, we're becoming less and less competitive in that sort of industry, that sort of market, because people are able to take their business to places in South, East and North Asia that are much more competitive. So they do.
US President Donald Trump's decision to withdraw aid in the Pacific is having real on-the-ground impacts for communities. Previously, USAID funded a range of initiatives across the region. In February, Trump announced 80% of those programs, worth more than $50 billion would be cut, with climate, refugee and sexual health programs high on the hit list. Te Wila Fortai spoke to the leader of an NGO in the Solomon Islands, Sharon Inone from Te Motu Province, where World Vision has withdrawn as a result of the USAID cuts.
Hello, my name is Sharon Inone. I am from Te Motu Province, the eastern most remote Solomon Islands province, and I am the founder and the CEO of Green Energy Pacific, a local female-led organization that is focused on building climate-smart villages in the Solomon Islands and planning to expand to other Pacific countries in the future.
Tell me what climate-smart villages means.
So a climate-smart village is more of an holistic approach where we are not only solving the water aspect to it, we want to see how we can bring in the gender, the health, the education, the technology, the agriculture, the partnerships.
Now, the title of this event is Aid is Under Attack. What does that mean for you and your organisation or the communities that you work with and live in?
It sounds like a very frightening question, but this organisation is not founded on money. It is founded on the Solomon Islands' Pacifica strength, the resilience, and the partnerships and the hope that we have. I believe we have been trained to believe that we need aid to survive, but our islands, you come to Anuta in Te Motu Province, your money will be useless. Yeah, they have been surviving, we've been surviving for years without a shop, without an engine, without a petrol, without a bag of rice, without a shop. And that is a model we're trying to restore, we're trying to build, we're trying to enhance.
In that sense, what is the relevance of foreign aid or foreign investment to local communities? We've heard a little bit about the US aid cut. What are the actual impacts of that?
The relevance of donor funding, I don't like the word aid, donor funding supporting our rural communities, it actually helps enhance what we already have. It also helps us to restore our systems that have been broken over the years, and it also helps us to build capacity.
So have you seen any impacts of cuts from USAID?
Yes, for sure. I have, living in Temotu province in the Solomon Islands, I have witnessed communities being impacted by USAID projects being terminated. World Vision works in Temotu province, and they have pulled out from the communities they have been working with, and they have closed their office in Temotu province. World Vision has a project with USAID called BHA, and it focuses on climate change readiness and also adaptation and mitigation, and they work with those communities that were impacted by tsunami back in 2013 in Temotu province. They help them to build resilience, also awareness on how to build resilience and building on traditional knowledge. Not only that, they connect them, these communities, they work with form village disaster risk committees that are responsible for response during disasters. And these committees are already established in the communities that they work with, and now they have disbanded all of that. It's one thing that I see that's different with New Zealand, is working with local organizations and also making capacity building for those local organizations as an outcome of their projects. So it is quite a sustainable way of doing things differently. And we also see like New Zealand government and your people coming down to our communities to chew betel nut with our people, drink cover, and share stories. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā sui fua.